Good afternoon and welcome into the Morning Burrito Podcast. And I am Michael.
I'm Andy.
And he's back. The beard.
The beard is back.
Fear the beard. It's back. And I think that's what they say about James Harden, the basketball player. Fear the beard.
Yeah, they do. They do.
But no, not James Harden. Andy, my good friend, is here again with us. And as most of you know, we are on a sabbatical journey with our lead pastor here at Hermanns. My typical co-host, Eric, is not with us. He will be. He's been gone 1 week, so he's still got 9 more to go, 11 more to go, something like that, 10 more. I don't know, something in there, that ballpark. And I guess that's assuming that after he gets back from sabbatical, he wants to continue doing this, because who knows? Maybe he'll be like, "Yeah, no, I'm done with the podcast thing. I've had enough time to think about it. I don't want to ever do this again." But just to refresh our fan, that sounds weird to say fans, our listeners and watchers, their memories. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to them and let them know who you are?
Well, my name's Andy, and I started out in our area doing youth ministry many years ago. And things have kind of, God has just taken and done different things. But recently, we've just become the pastor of the Boardman Community Church. Still do youth ministry, have a youth group there in Boardman, do one in Irrigan, do FCA for Irrigan High School. And so maybe jack of all trades, master of none. Maybe.
You're master of cool beards.
Cool beards, yes.
And concert promotion,
yes, which is coming soon.
Yes, we have shared the news that Disciple will be coming to Hermiston Nazarene Church. This is my partner in crime in planning that, and we are really excited to bring them. I doubt they'll be on the podcast at some point, but hey, maybe.
Hey, that would be kind of cool.
That would be cool. Even if I could get Kevin in here, that would be great, the lead singer. But yeah, just a quick update for you folks on Eric and where he's at. So him and Gabriel, his daughter, oldest kid, and their youngest child, Garrick, have gone to Branson, Missouri, and they rode a riverboat. They saw some shows. Eric got called up on stage for a magic show, which figures. He sat in the front row, so that's what he gets. And they went and saw a musical. I don't know if it was a musical. A production is probably a better way to put it. Of Jesus' life in Branson.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
So that's pretty cool. They've since gone to Michigan to see Eric's father and wife. And I think today they are heading to Muskegon, Michigan, to do some fishing, salmon fishing on Lake Michigan, which is really cool. And, you know, as a kid who grew up in Chicago, right near Lake Michigan, you know, when you don't grow up near the ocean, Lake Michigan is an ocean to you.
Yes, it is.
And I know people laugh at that because they're like, it's a lake. I'm like, yes, it's a lake, but it's a very, very large lake.
Yes.
Like you can't see across it at most points. So it's a very, very, very big lake, ginormous lake. Hence why they're called the Great Lakes. They're big, very, very big. So anyway, that's where they're at. He'll be back in town this week, and then jumping in the car with his wife and heading this coming weekend, out to Idaho, Cottonwood, Idaho, I think is the name of the town, and they're going to a monastery. So they're going to spend a week at a monastery, him and his wife.
Fun.
Yeah, I mean, Eric's kind of like an extrovert like us, so I'm not entirely sure he's going to survive 7 days of quiet and, you know, singing the Psalms, and I don't know how that's going to work out for him. Now, his wife, on the other hand, she's more introverted, so I'm sure she'll have a great time reading books and, relaxing.
Sometimes solitude is good. I like it every once in a while.
Yeah.
But if I had to do it for like 7 days,
that's a long time to be without people and not
time.
talk.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that I could go that long without talking. No. But anyway, we're going to get into our topic here in just a moment, so we'll be right back on the Morning Burrito Podcast. To be quite honest, those transition points are great now because we actually have burritos. Because unlike Eric,
they're
you
good.
actually took the time to go and get some for us.
I did. I stopped.
Which-
And they're pretty good.
I said that as a joke, but I was really happy when you walked in with them. I'll be honest. But anyway, so just a follow up on how we know each other. So I've been in Hermiston now since September of 19. Sounds weird saying 19, like I'm, from the 1900s, like, back in the year in 19, I was doing, this, that, and I was in the war or whatever. It was like, okay, but anyway. No, but in September of 2019, my family moved here. And it wasn't too long after that, and probably the spring of 2020, right before the pandemic hit, I think. You and I met each other at a youth pastors meeting here in town. We try to get together at least once a month. But at the time, you were working full-time outside of the church, doing FCA as well, and I don't think you had started the youth group yet, but you were doing FCA plus working. And I didn't get to see you a ton until about halfway through 2020, sometime in the summer, late summertime, you and I connected, and from there on, it was we've become pretty good friends, and I would say a close friend. We share a lot of stuff with each other, but we are not just guys who do ministry to students. We are guys who do a ministry to students together. Yep. You've brought your kids to our youth group several times. We've put on 2 concerts, working on a third now. Yep. In a pretty short period of time. I mean, it's pretty successful. Now, fortunately, we've been lucky, whatever you want to call it, to have Seventh Day Slumber offer 2 free shows to us,
which was fantastic.
Any other bands that want to offer that to us, we'll take you up on that. You can come anytime.
We'll throw that out there. Any bands that want to come for free?
Yep,
no problem.
We will never. Well, shouldn't say never, but we'll rarely turn down a Christian band if they're going to come for free.
Yes.
And we've had. I don't know that it was really you and I that put this together. It was more Rod, our mutual friend Rod. But we did have George Moss come to the church when he was here for City Fest. So we've been lucky. There are people in town that are now calling us the Christian Concert Church, which I'm okay with that. Like if that's the title that we're going to get as a church, that's fine.
Yep,
I mean, there are worse things people could call us. So
there is. I've heard them all.
I'll take that. But we have become really good friends, and one of the things that we share is a real love for students and for families. And so today's topic, we're going to talk about, I've titled today's show, Kids Have It So Easy Today. And that's really kind of a foil. It's not, we don't really believe that, as we're going to talk about this afternoon. But the reality is there are people who think kids have it so easy today. And so let's just get right in. From your perspective, now you're not just a guy who is in youth ministry as a youth pastor. You're not just a guy who does FCA. You're now a lead pastor. So you see, all aspects of people's thoughts and opinions and things. I mean, as youth pastors, sometimes we don't get the full range of people's opinions. Sometimes they won't tell us stuff. They'll go tell the lead pastor, and then the lead pastor will tell us stuff. But what's your perception, or what have you heard people say, older folks, when they talk about students? What's their perspective of students?
Well, I would really say it varies. It is kind of all over the page. Some adults, they really enjoy the young people's company. Really enjoy listening to them, being around them. And then you have the total other spectrum where they have a hard time being around them because of how they act and their demeanor and the things that they say. They're not... they're not... some adults don't live in the same culture as young people, so they don't have things in common, so it's hard for them to connect.
Sure. Do you think it's do you think that we as adults, and we're not old, but we're certainly older. I mean, when teens talk to us, they think we're old, right? Like,
I've heard
we're only a few years apart from each other in age, but we both, I always, every time I ask a group of kids, how old do you think I am? It's always older than I am by a good margin.
Some of the kids think I was around with Adam.
Well, you do have his beard. I'm sure Adam had a beard like you. So
I'm like, wow.
I mean, if he was created perfect, he had to have a beard. And frankly, to be honest, I would argue that if he was perfect, he had to be bald too. So the hair was here, not here. But I think that we as adults can be very guilty of putting unrealistic expectations on students, and we say things like, "Oh, I would never have done this to the thing," swearing or being disrespectful to an adult or being disrespectful to parents or whatever. When in reality, we did all of those things as kids. Like we were all of those things, and maybe even in some cases more.
Yeah, I can agree in some aspects of that. I've listened to some students talk, and they've told me conversations where they have thrown out cuss words at adults and stuff like that. And I'll just simply ask them, "You talk like that to adults, to your teachers?" "Oh yeah, it's not a big deal. They don't care." And I'm kind of taken back by that a little bit because in my generation, when we were children, kids, we just didn't talk like that.
Right.
But we were kind of taught by our parents to not say that kind of words. If there was something we wanted to communicate, then we needed to use words to express that. And I don't know, and that's where that disconnect comes sometimes, where I don't think some adults are necessarily connected to the younger people, and so the young people get excited, throw some colorful language.
And I also would say that adults have somewhat to an extent created this because we've allowed students over the course of probably the last 15, 20 years, I would say, to get away with that.
Yes,
like there has not been discipline in that. Parents are probably the biggest culprits of all of them. But even teachers, like, why are you putting up with a kid using that language in your room? Like, be a good teacher. Tell them no.
Yep.
If schools discipline kids for using that kind of language in a classroom, it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that's like, look, the culture is shifting. There's no doubt of that. And there's some of this that we cannot control, but we can control it to a large extent. And we tend to say, oh, well, woe is us. We can't do it. Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Stop allowing it.
Yeah.
So I think if I'm hearing you right, and, I think you and I are probably on the same wavelength on this for the most part, I think adults typically, if they're not directly involved in serving students, because I think you set those people aside because they have the passion for kids. I'm talking, you're just normal, everyday person who really doesn't interact with students or doesn't want to interact with students. Mm-hmm. I think they typically would perceive students as entitled. I hear that word a ton.
Yeah.
That they're disrespectful, they're rude, they're caustic. I've even heard that students are just caustic to be around. That they're dumb, ignorant. There's just lots of negativity that adults will speak in regards to students, teenagers specifically. And again, I think a lot of it is self-made. The adults have caused this culture.
Yeah.
Now let's flip it on this on the other side of the coin. How do teens, as being people that work with students all the time, weekly, multiple times a week for you, how do students perceive adults typically?
Well, there's a couple different ways, I think. Some students see adults as, people they want to be around because they look up to them if they're missing a mother or a father figure, or even a parent figure at all. Mm-hmm. And so they want to be around adults, and they want that interaction. And then there's some that they see adults as maybe the enemy and are afraid to have a conversation. It takes them a long time to warm up to an adult that they don't know. And so I could see where in the culture, if it's a adult where they don't want to necessarily interact with kids, that student, young adult, whatever, is not going to come to them. They're not going to try to have that conversation because of how the adult perceives them. And even, we're in ministry. We do stuff with students all the time. We even have kids that don't really want to open up and talk to us. And we're working on those relationships with them. And so it's like they're closed off a lot of the time. And it takes a lot to get them a lot of trust to get them out of that.
Yeah, I think teens have heard those buzzwords we were talking about a moment ago, that they're ignorant, that they're disrespectful, and unfortunately, I think what it's done, we've created such an abrasive culture that there's an assumption by students, most students, that adults have an agenda when they're talking to them. That
I could see that.
That the adults are coming to change them or to put them in chains. Essentially, I mean, they may not use that terminology, but they're coming to put them in a prison, so to speak. You hear this all the time about high school and middle school, that they're more like prisons than they are like that. They should be more free thinking. No, they should be like prisons. That's absolutely true. I know when I went to school, there were things that I was not allowed to do at school, and discipline is important. But there is an assumption, I think, by a lot of students, and in some ways rightfully so, that adults are coming with an agenda, that they're trying to accomplish something with students. I know that in ministry, I've made the mistake of telling a student that not so much that they're a project, but that I want to see God work in your life, and I want to help you, and they don't feel like they need help. Like that's not what they want. And so I think teens overall, they perceive adults for the most part as obstacles or barriers to them living their best life. I mean, I think that's, if you watch YouTube or TikTok long enough, those are what you're going to hear. Those are the sorts of phrases you're going to hear and thoughts and ideas that you're going to hear from a student who is posting on TikTok or on Instagram or on YouTube. I mean, that's what I hear all the time.
Yeah. Well, we can kind of see it in movies too, that they're putting out there.
Sure.
Adults are not cool to be around because they stop them from doing what they want to do.
Well, and the truth is, when we were kids, I mean, I know my parents at least, and my teachers and principals and things, they were obstacles to me doing the things that I wanted to do. But here's the reality: I'm a teenager. I'm an idiot. So I shouldn't have been doing the things. Like I'm speaking for myself, not for all teenagers. I was an idiot. And I needed people to put the brakes on me because I was going to do stuff that was going to get me hurt or in trouble or mess up in school or whatever. So I needed those guardrails, so to speak, around me from adults. And, I remember, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but I don't know if this is how it was for you when you became a dad. But when I had my first kid, I remember we're in the hospital, and my wife Claudia had just given birth to our oldest daughter Harper, and I walk out, and my father and my father-in-law, the two granddads, were out in the waiting room. My mom and her mom were in the birthing room with us. I love you guys, but we would never do that again, and we didn't do it with our second one, but. I walk out there, and the first thing I said to my dad, I sat down next to him. They were sitting one chair apart, so I sat between my father-in-law and my dad. And I looked at my dad, and I said, I was such an idiot as a kid. I understand everything you said now. Like you are the most intelligent person I know. And it took me having a kid to really understand that my dad, with all his faults, I mean, he's not perfect, but my dad tried to teach me things. My dad tried to instill values in me and tried to help me to prepare me for manhood and prepare me to be a husband and prepare me to be a father and all of these things. And most of the time I thought he was an idiot. Like I would look at my dad and I'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. He would use the phrases like, when I went to school, I walked uphill on both ways in the snow barefoot. No shoes. Yeah. Yep. So, which that was not ever true. But my dad would tell me these things, and I just never really understood that, being a parent, being a dad, being an adult, being a man, it is actually very hard. This is not easy. And I think what we've done is we've made adolescence, this is one of the big problems, I think. We've made adolescence so long now that 26, your brain stops developing at 26. So therefore, you're an adolescent till you're 26. You can stay on your parents' insurance till you're 26. You can stay in your parents' house and not have a job, not go to school, just live in your parents' home for your entire life. And this extending adolescence into adulthood and not allowing kids to transition into becoming adults and take on the burdens that come with being an adult and the trials that adulthood brings has actually crippled in a lot of ways a lot of people that are much younger than us. And then we look at that, our young adults, and they're the ones teaching our students now, and you can't be really surprised at what we're getting.
Yeah, I know the younger generation right now does have it harder as far as finances and job market, maybe housing market, that type of thing. And there is some different stresses there that we didn't have. I didn't have a problem finding a place to live. I didn't have a problem paying the rent. I worked at Walmart at making minimum wage, and I could afford everything. And now it takes 2 incomes, and then you're still struggling just to even, try to get by. And so I can see where the younger, as far as that aspect goes of life.
Well, I was actually thinking about this the other day, Andy. And, yes, we obviously know we're not, this show is not a necessarily like current events show. We talk about topics, but not necessarily current events. But we know that inflation is at a 40-year record high right now. So, everything is more expensive right now than it ever has been. Gas is gold, I guess, now.
It is.
When you hear the Beverly Hillbillies song, it's black gold. Yep.
I understand.
Oil is black gold. But in all reality, part of the reason why money is so hard to come by these days, or things seem like they're so much harder to acquire, like a home or a car or any of these sorts of things. Number one is because of government interference in a lot of those industries. Government makes things more expensive. It's just the reality of it. But I also think that a lot of it has to do with we have based on when we were young adults in the late 90s, early 2000s, the expectations of what we're going to have in our life, like the material things that we are going to possess, is a lot different today than it ever has been before. I remember the most expensive thing that you probably had in your house when I was a young adult, like in my college dorm room, for instance, was an Xbox, which cost like $250 back then.
You had an Xbox?
I had an Xbox.
I had an Atari 2600.
Well, talking in college. When you were in college? That's sad. I'm sorry.
I know. Hey, it's okay.
But the thing was that was it. You had a small TV, and like I remember, if you're like under the age of 26, you probably don't even know what these look like now. But I had a like rectangular shaped TV.
Oh yeah.
That had like the 13-inch screen.
Oh
right?
Yeah, I had
color
a 13-inch
projection TV, and then on the bottom was a VCR.
Oh yeah.
It was connected to it, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And that's what I had at my dorm room in college, and we had the old RCA cables, red and white and yellow, and
yep. Oh yeah.
And that's how I played Xbox. Halo nights on my dorm floor and whatever. Yeah. And that was it. That's what we had. I had a cell phone as a freshman in college. I bought myself. My parents didn't buy it for me. I struggled to pay that payment every month because it was expensive for somebody who was working part-time at Walmart as a pharmacy technician. But I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't have unlimited data. We didn't use it for internet. We used it to call people. That's it. And limited texting, because texting took like 15 minutes to make a 50-word text message or whatever. 15-word. But all that to be said, kids now expect I'm going to have a big TV, I'm going to have my Xbox, and I'm not just going to have my Xbox or my PlayStation or my Switch. I'm going to have internet, so I got to pay for the internet, and I've got to pay for, the Xbox Live account or the PlayStation account or whatever. And then I got to have my Netflix. Can't live without Netflix or Hulu, and all these different things. And we pay for all these different services that we never used to pay for. I mean, think about it. I never paid for cable. My parents did.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And when my wife and I first got married, we didn't have it because we couldn't afford it.
Yeah. Well, we only had cable for a short amount of time when Ann and I first got together, and then I hurt my knee and I couldn't work. So what do you get rid of? You get rid of the things that you don't really need.
Yep.
And cable, it was gone.
But see, that's, I think, one of those things, again, culturally, our kids have an expectation that they're going to have all of these things, all the technological pieces, all the iPads and iPods and iPhones and, Galaxy Note tablets and things. And what this has created is, yes, I mean, kids are entitled. They do feel entitled to have all of these different things. And part of it is because we as adults, I know my parents, I haven't had this as much as my parents did, but my parents certainly had I want to give them the life that I never had.
Yes, I've heard that.
That is the worst, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but that is the worst mentality to have as a parent. Like, you're saying, I'm going to intentionally spoil my kid because I wasn't spoiled. No, just don't spoil your kid. Like, there are things that they need and things that they don't need. And, where you can dote on your kid, sure, fine, dote on your kid from time to time. But the more you dote on your kid, the more you make things available to them, the more you don't punish your kid when they do something wrong. Mm-hmm. You create the monster that is now what it is.
Yeah, yep, agree.
So the question then is, how do we bridge this gap between older adults who look at students as entitled, as idiots, as ignorant, whatever, think of the words, and the students who can't trust adults because they feel like they're always being treated unfairly, that they're always being victimized by older people. Mm-hmm. How do we begin to bridge that gap is where I want to go now. So one of the questions that I get from adults a lot, and I don't know if you get this too in your circle, but how do adults have to be relevant, quote unquote, to kids? Like, do we have to be able to minister to them? Do we have to listen to their music? Do we have to watch their movies, read their books, have all the apps and do all of the social media stuff that they do, watch YouTube, whatever? Do we have to do that to be relevant to students nowadays?
So for me personally, I kind of I know the things that are going on. I kind of pay attention to what's going on in social media. I pay attention to the news for what's going on in the world. But as far as having all of the apps and following all of them and making sure I'm keeping up with social media, I don't necessarily do that kind of stuff. When I see the kids, I try to have more of I don't want to totally say a friendship type of thing, but it is kind of like a friendship, but I kind of set those boundaries. As far as, what you can say to me, the things we can do together, that type of deal, so that they can trust me. But to be like wrapped up into their culture, I don't necessarily desire to be wrapped up into the culture because of my stance and walking with Jesus every day. The culture doesn't walk with Jesus every day. And so when students express things that they see or they hear, or I hear them over talking about something when I know what they're talking about, mm-hmm. Then I just kind of try to interject of, well, why does that interest you? What makes that a big deal to you? Why do you watch that? That type of thing, just to kind of get their perspective and kind of steer it around to what Jesus would do about things. So, I mean, I kind of know what's going on in the culture, but I'm not going to be in it.
Yeah.
I don't think it hinders anything by any means, because I mean, all I have to do is throw it out there on one social media app, Facebook. That's all I use because I'm old. If we had MySpace, I would use it, but
That's how I met my wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But all I have to do is just put things out there, and kids come, and because they want to do things, they want to have fun, they want to be around adults, people that they trust, that they enjoy, and so I don't necessarily. I'm not in that culture.
Honestly, I've I've come to believe, and this isn't a broad stroke where it applies to everybody, but I think a lot of adults use the relevant excuse that they're not relevant to students to excuse the reason why they don't serve and love on students. I've heard a lot of adults who will say things like, well, I'll pray for our student ministry, or, I'll give money to help for them to go to camp or something, which are all great things. You should be doing both of those things. But if I had a choice between you doing those two things and living life with a student, I would pick living life with a student.
Yeah.
And praying. I mean, praying should be a no-brainer. Like, that should always be that's the first thing. Like, you start moving down from prayer. And I think it's a cop-out to say I'm not relevant to students because I don't watch their movies, listen to their music, go on their websites, follow their YouTube accounts or Instagram accounts or whatever. Look, I'm a youth pastor full-time, and I don't do any of that stuff. Like you, I'm aware of what's going on. I keep apprised of cultural things that are happening in our midst. But to be quite honest, I think the biggest thing that we can do, and this is my last question for today, is what do adults have to do to be relevant, quote unquote, and reach students for Christ? I think it's very simple. And I think this is even beyond reaching students for Christ. I mean, just reaching a student and having an effect on a student's life in a positive way, whether that's for Jesus or not. I think the big thing is you got to be authentic.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to sacrifice time. You have to be willing to be present in their life. I think too often adults get very wrapped up in what they've got going on. And I also think not being too present in their life. Students need space. And I think sometimes we try to be overbearing with kids.
Agree.
and this is a struggle for me as a youth pastor, because there are times where I know like that student needs me in their life.
Yeah.
But I can't push. Recently
just pushes them away.
Yeah. Recently I had a student who I love dearly, but they are not a part of our group any longer. They haven't been a part of our group for some time now. And it's painful. It's painful to know that this student does not have the influence, does not come to church, does not come to a youth group any longer, and is being influenced by things that are just not positive in their life.
Yeah.
And, their parental guidance is as best as it possibly could be in the circumstance in which they live, but it's just rough. And so as a pastor, you have to realize, there's some that you're just not going to have influence on, and and that's their choice. We can't influence everybody. And so this is why a lot of you who listen are parents or grandparents to this show. You need to be as present as you possibly can be. And sometimes it does mean being in culture with them. Like, for instance, for me, it's video games. That's how I am mostly in the culture with my kids. There are students who I play Fortnite with, much to my chagrin, because I hate that game. I have refused to play Minecraft, by the way. I just will not play that game. I can't.
My boys love it, and I cannot pull myself to even.
I don't have the patience nor the inclination to sit and play that game. Like, I just can't do it. My daughter loves it. I can't do it.
No.
Just can't do it.
No.
But I'll play Call of Duty or whatever, or a sports game, Madden or whatever, what have you, with kids. And we even talked about it last Wednesday. You brought your group, and I made the joke that there's one student in my room that most of the time we're not even talking when we're playing games together, which you would think, well, what are you doing then? What's the point? I'm still present. I'm there.
Yep.
And maybe 99% of the time if we're talking about anything, it's just about the game or about general things. But there's that 1% where a kid is like, Pastor Michael, I have something I need to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And while we're playing the game, or maybe we stop the game and we just talk, and those are the moments that are valuable because you've built that trust. They know you're present. They know you're there and available to them when they need you. Mm-hmm. I had somebody, a student, come up to me on Sunday after church, had a thing going on in her life, and she pulled me aside and talked to me for 20 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes after service. Some people would say, well, your wife's trying to get out of here with her 2 kids, and you're sitting there talking to a student.
Yeah, my kids
that's
tell
important.
me all the time.
That's important. I mean, that's valuable time to me.
Yeah.
And I had an adult who was waiting on me, so I had to talk to that adult before I left about something important.
Yep.
I had to count our fundraiser money for camp. I mean, there was things to do, but talking to people, having a relationship with people is the key.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to add something too about the older generation. I really feel like they have lots to give to younger people.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily mean, well, they just grew up in a different time, a simpler time. And I know some older adults, they don't necessarily like the speed of things, how everything's moving so fast, all the electronics.
Neither do I.
All that kind of stuff. But those valuable things of, relaxing, family time. I just visited my friend the other day, and I worked on his ranch when I was growing up. And, his health is kind of declining and whatnot. But, we just walked outside, walked around the ranch. He's like my grandpa. And we were just standing out there by the fence, and I said, thank you for all the things you taught me. And he was like, I taught you something? I'm like, yeah. I was like, I really, really enjoyed my time here working because I was with you and the things that I learned.
Yeah.
And then, it just kind of got quiet, that awkward silence, between 2 guys.
Yeah.
And then he's like, it's really peaceful, isn't it, out here?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, because all we were doing was just standing, looking at the field in the breeze. And you don't get that from, that's something that has to be like handed down almost to the younger people because they don't understand that. They don't grasp that stop and enjoy life. It's hurry, 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 hurry. I got to, have something in my life going on every single minute or it's boring.
Yeah, if you don't have a church, or if you do have a church and you just want to listen to a sermon, I'm not saying it's great because I preached it, so I don't know if it's great, but I did talk a little bit about this yesterday with our senior adults during my message here at Hermanns, and I told him, I said, just because your age doesn't mean that you can't have a serious impact on a student.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean you have to play the games on a Wednesday night with a student. It doesn't mean that you have to even come on Wednesday nights to have an impact on students. You just need to be present in their life, be authentic.
Yeah.
I think it's always amazing when and it has happened so sparingly. I wish I could say it was happening more often in my current church, but even in previous churches where a senior adult who is not familially connected to a student shows up for their games or shows up for a concert because they know that a student in the church is, has this gift or talent, and they want to support them in that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff you can do. Like you don't have to go to the Wednesday night youth group and be a life group leader and go to camp and all of these things. But you can do those things, and I don't think age should negate you from being able to do those things either. Go to camp, go to fall retreat, go to winter retreat or whatever.
Yeah. It's like being a mentor.
Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom there. Why would you hold that to yourself?
Yeah.
Give that to the students.
Yeah. We have some older people in the church, and I like hanging out with them because I'm gaining wisdom from them. Mm-hmm. And they could be just like my parents' age, but they know stuff, and it's good stuff.
And we're dumb kids.
Yeah, yeah. I'm still a snot-nosed kid, to some of those people. But there's wisdom there, and there's things that they learned in the way that they used to do things. That it's not cultural now. Yeah, but it was very relevant, and it impacted their life in a big way. Yeah, and so I think they should share it, and be a mentor, just be in kids' lives around them.
Yeah, and you talked about, this for a lot of, particularly our senior adults, they came from a time when there was a lot slower pace to life.
Oh, yeah.
that's a huge thing to teach a student, to talk to them about how you don't have to go so fast.
Nope.
That, it's ironic. Kids today have less sex than at any other point in history that it's been recorded, statistically speaking, which is interesting considering this is the most over-sexualized group of students ever.
Yeah.
Obviously it's how you define sex, I suppose, but they have high rates of pornography addictions and all those things, but they're not having physical sex with one another as much as it used to be, even when we were in school. However, and I said this on Wednesday night at our youth group time together, our kids are the most connected that they've ever been in history, but they're also the most disconnected and lonely kids that we've ever had.
Yeah, agreed.
And I found it interesting, our two groups, there were very few kids that would rather text or talk on social media than talk on the phone. And I don't know if that was just because they thought that's what I wanted to hear. If they were answering that truthfully, or if that's what they'd like to think about themselves, or if they were being honest. Because statistically, I don't think kids know how to talk to one another anymore.
No, they struggle with that. I mean, it's easy to send a text. I mean, they'll be sitting there talking to like 8 or 10 people at one time, but you put them in a room together, they won't talk face to face.
Well, you have them text each other in the same room.
Yeah, that's
instead
what they'll
of
have to
talking.
do. Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah,
I mean, and they're disconnected.
And this is where, senior adults, even, middle-aged adults, where you can come alongside a teenager and get them to talk, get them to learn how to communicate better, use words. I mean, I have a 2-year-old and she's almost 3 now. And the worst thing, and we say it now constantly, is use your words. Like she'll just grunt. I don't know what you want. Talk to me.
Oh, that's funny.
Share what you want.
My 5-year-old, he just won't stop talking. He has such a vocabulary, it's crazy, and he just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and reminds me, just wait. One day they'll be a teenager and they won't want to talk to you as much.
That's true.
So, I mean, when they're young, it's like the perfect time to mentor them and get them used to talking and used to, being vocal and being out and doing things, because
I mean, you've experienced that because you've got older kids and younger kids, and I'm right. Like my oldest is right on that line now, so she is a teen, like a tween, I guess. She's in 6th grade, going into 6th grade, and so she still likes having deep conversations with Dad. She likes listening to Dad. She respects Dad. I hope that always is the case, but I'm a realist. Like I know that's not necessarily going to continue, but pastor's kids, we had a podcast all about pastor's kids before, but it's a hard life to be a Christian kid, to be raised in a Christian home, because the culture doesn't, my daughter, your kids, their friends predominantly don't go to church and don't have the same upbringing that our kids are getting from us.
Yeah.
The culture is telling them wildly different things. Their peers are telling them wildly different things. I know my daughter's friends in 5th grade are talking about things that we don't discuss in my house very much.
Yep.
There are words that are being said in school in 5th grade that we didn't hear in 5th grade. From anybody.
Yeah.
And so life is difficult. And, we had the title of the episode was Kids Have It So Easy Today. I think the truth is kids don't have it as easy as we think. If you're an adult and you're thinking that, yes, they are entitled. Yes, they have a lot of things at their fingertips that no generation has ever had before. That is all true.
That's true.
But we also have the most suicidal ideation in teenagers than ever before. Yeah. We have more loneliness and depression and anxiety and mood disorders than ever before in history.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a coincidence. It's because we have the most connected yet disconnected culture that has ever been created. We have people who are starved for fame. That's why you have Instagram and TikTok being a thing, and YouTube. People want to be Insta famous or whatever. It's because they want to be relevant. They want people to love them and care about them. Mm-hmm. So if you're an adult, you can have an impact on a student by loving them authentically and truthfully and being there present in their life. And it will be a cultural shock to them to have an adult who actually just listens and sits there and cares about them, who isn't there to change them. Let the Holy Spirit do the changing. That's what the Holy Spirit does.
Yeah. Some adults talk about these conversations, or talk about these things where they see the young people doing things that they don't like or whatever, but you have the opportunity to make the biggest impact on them. If you want the culture to be different, then you can start with one kid at a time.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of adults for plenty of kids.
That's right.
All it takes is one. I mean, it's, sometimes we feel like, I have to have a ministry. I got to have 50 kids, 100 kids or whatever, but you can make an impact with just spending time with one.
Yep.
And making that kid important and teaching them, good things, biblical things.
Yep.
And you can say a lot without ever saying a passage of, directly where a verse is at in the Bible. You can teach a kid a lot.
Yeah, I said it yesterday. We are created to be the GPS for other people in their spiritual journey. That God, through the work of the Holy Spirit, uses us as a GPS to keep people on the right path. And so, He uses the Bible, of course. The Bible's number one, and 1A and 1B is the Holy Spirit. I mean, those two things work in conjunction, but the Holy Spirit also uses us to be guides, to be mentors, to be GPS for others. And what generation needs it more? What generation needs guidance and direction more than the younger generation, the Gen Z and beyond? Millennials too, I suppose, which I'm on the upper end. I don't like to claim it. I'm more like a Gen Xer like you are, but anyway. Well, Andy, thank you for jumping on the podcast today. I don't know if we solved anything, but we certainly spoke about some important topics. I think
good topic today. Good, thank you.
And next week we have camp week, so I will be gone. Eric will be gone. Gabriel is gone. We're all out of the church office next week. But we do have a special podcast for you on Wednesday at noon. As always, our friend Jenna Wise is going to be here. She identifies herself as a fan of our show, which I think is awesome. Wow. So, Jenna, if you're listening, your show's coming next week, so be excited about that.
You have one follower.
Yeah. She was up here visiting, and she came on the show, and we talked about being a Christian on a non-Christian campus and college campus, and how do you retain your faith? How do you live your faith out in a place where is very anti-Christian in the way that it behaves. I mean, there are teachers who are rabid atheists on state school, college campuses, and there's protests all the time now, and there's sex and all kinds of things, drugs and whatever that are happening on college campuses. A lot of drinking, of course, and so she speaks to a lot of that, and it's really encouraging if you're a parent or a grandparent of a college kid. It's definitely something you want to listen to, or if you're a young adult or a young older teenager who's about to go into college, it might be something that would be encouraging to you. So tune in next week for Jenna's stop on the show. You will see Eric, but again, Eric didn't come in to do the show. We recorded it a few weeks ago, so it's not a show that's happening live. So we love you guys, and we will see you in a couple weeks on the Morning Burrito Podcast.